You are listening to the SDSU Football Podcast, presented by the East Village Times, with your hosts Andre Hagverdian and Paul Garrison. Welcome, listeners, to another episode of the SDSU Football Podcast. I am Andre Hagverdian, and with me is Paul Garrison. San Diego State is currently in the midst of their 4-week spring camp. And one of the hot topics is obviously the offense and the quarterbacks. And we were fortunate enough to get offensive coordinator and quarterback coach Jeff Hecklinski to sit down and talk to Paul and I for an interview for the podcast. So hope you guys enjoy it. Our special guest today is offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach Jeff Hecklinski for San Diego State. Heklinski is entering his third year of his second stint with the Aztec football program. In his first tour of duty on the Mesa, Heklinski was the Aztecs' assistant head coach and mentored the running backs while serving as the program's recruiting coordinator in 2009 to 2010. He's had 22 years of collegiate coaching experience under his belt, including 12 seasons working with current San Diego State Aztec head coach Brady Hoke. We want to welcome Coach Heklinski to the SDSU podcast and wish him a happy belated birthday. How are you doing today, Coach?
Doing great, Andre. And Paul, thank you for having me on, and thank you for wishing me birthday. You know, I think at this stage, you know, your birthdays go backwards rather than forwards. You know, it's just another day. You know, it just reminds us how old we really are. That's what my wife tells me. You know, I'm actually the same age as her right now, so she's just happy about that.
Nice. So people may not realize this, but you were a wildly successful high school player. Mm-hmm. Super Prep magazine, which is like the Rivals and 247 Sports of your day, had you as one of the top 3 players in the country. So take us back to the glory days and what the early 90s was like for you.
It was kind of it was kind of the beginning of everything. So Tom Lemming and Super Prep were the two kind of first people to really start the recruiting and make recruiting public. Tom Lemming kind of had his Midwest, and he was more Midwest in East and got into the South. Super Prep was more West Coast into Texas and into the South. So they kind of merged into the South. Both of them did. And Tom was actually based out of Chicago. And at that time, I think I was the cover of his first magazine, and that was really kind of the first recruiting magazine to come out. So it was really kind of the first time that recruiting became public for the fan base and the universities, you know, and how all that has transformed now into, like you said, Rivals 247 and how public recruiting is across the board. So it was a fun time. There was a lot of fun events that we went to, you know, and the other thing it was really the first time where you got to meet a lot of the other top recruits, not only in your state or in your area, but around the country. When you went to some of these, and really they were pictures. I mean, you just went and gathered at a certain spot, took a group picture and got to meet, and then they talked and did article interviews, and they put it together in a magazine because there was no internet at that time. And so it was a lot of fun. You know, I mean, that's where I first met, you know, Pat Fitzgerald. I'm trying to think of some of the other guys that, you know, at that time were some of the, you know, I mean, ended up being some of the best players. And, you know, Scott Frost was, I think, right ahead of me or right below me. I mean, there were a lot of great quarterbacks. Scott Loeffler, who's the head coach at Bowling Green, went to Michigan. You know, we were all in the same class, and we would all be around in the same areas. So it was a lot of fun.
In your near 25 years as a college coach, you've been a position coach at running back, receiver, tight end, and quarterback. How does that experience help you in your current role as the offensive coordinator at San Diego State?
It's an understanding of what each one of those positions needs and what it takes, you know, what their coaches need, what their players need from their coaches, and being able to give them their time. You know, I've been fortunate to be a coordinator, you know, a number of years, and then obviously being a position coach under a number of really well-known coordinators, starting with, John Makovic at Arizona, and then Stan Parrish at Ball State. You come here, Al Borges, and obviously the things that he's done. And then at Michigan, we finished with Doug Nussmeier, who came from Alabama at the time. And so, just seeing all the different styles, and then being a position coach in different rooms, understanding, every coach is different, every position is different. And then allowing those coaches, all that time that they need in order to get their positions ready. And really, to be honest with you, the amount of time they really don't need to hear from me. I'm a quarterback coach first and a coordinator second. And my time needs to be being a quarterback coach. And the coordinator part of it then comes at the tail end, really, as you're more preparing for the game, calling the game, and getting practice ready. And when you do that, it enables me to be a position coach before a coordinator too.
Now, last spring, you teased this giant 3-ring binder that you have of all of your research and all the things. And I've been so curious about that binder ever since you first brought it up. Could you take us through some of that research, how you prepare for that, and what are some of the focuses that you look for this past off season in preparing it?
Well, the binder's really put together coming through the week. So that really comes through everything that's put together throughout the course of the week. And how it all comes together, every position coach has an area of expertise. So Coach Cooper runs all of our base first and second down, and he gives me about, anywhere between 8 to 12 thoughts on based on first and second down passes. And then he operates everything from 3rd and 3+. And so he's really the expert in that. Jeff Horton runs all the red zone. Mike Coach Goff has all the short yardage goal line. Savai helps with all the first and second down runs and protections. And so, they really are the experts in those areas, and we meet, and then they present their thoughts, ideas, and what we're going to see. A lot of that binder is put together through all of that stuff that goes into play. Then after we meet, after we go through everything, I come back, sit down, go through all of their thoughts, all the staff's thoughts. Because, even like if you remember the Boise State 4th and 1, the play action wheel to Dan, that was a 4th and 1 play that actually Jeff Horton had come up with the design of that play. The naked on 4th and 2 on the first touchdown against Nevada, that's a goal line play that actually Coach Cooper, that Hunky, had thought through and said, hey, what if we did something like this? And so we come together as a staff and put it all together as a staff, and then I come in, organize it all, put it into the game plan, call sheet and all that, and then go back through and say, okay, this is what we were thinking, this is what we wanted, and making sure we're all on the same page. So we really work together as a staff as we come through it all. That's what creates those individual binders as you come through the course of a week. It's a lot of information to get down to calling about, really anywhere between 80 and 90 plays, what should be between 80 and 90 plays in a game.
Talking about the passing game last year, and in the improvement in the passing game, I think there's a lot of ways that you could kind of present those ideas. If the season was broken in half, SDSU passed for 106 yards the first half of the season, 188 over the last 8. If it was broken up into thirds, I think it's even more pronounced. Mm-hmm. First 4 games, 118, middle 5, 144, final 5, 232. Of all the ways to tell the story, though, I think one that's I personally found convincing is that in games where you guys had 24 or more passing attempts, you were over 200 yards passing, 209. When you had 19 or fewer, you had 95. Is the story of the passing game in 2021, or a big part of it, more about the opportunities to be able to throw the ball than just about anything else?
I think opportunity comes with the development of your quarterback and the trusting of the quarterback in those situations. And I think, in a lot of those games, I know like in Utah, I mean, if you think back to Arizona, I think we had 180 at half before Jordan got hurt, but then you go to Utah and, we obviously didn't throw the ball very well. We weren't very successful until, really, it came down into critical situations. I thought at times, but those we only threw it for 44 yards. But I think that's the development of the quarterback. That was Lucas's first start. I think really more the progression that we had with Lucas throughout the season really played into a strong part of those numbers continuing to increase. And obviously, the increased amounts of throws come with the increased amount of first downs and being able to call more plays in sequence. I think back to Hawaii, I think we had three straight 3-and-outs to start the Hawaii game, or to start the second half of Hawaii. And we didn't throw the ball in either one of those sequences. And I think it was more of a comfort zone and being able to control the game from an overall standpoint with our quarterback. And really that was kind of the beginning of that process, because in that fourth series, we started throwing the ball with Lucas. We started taking off. Lucas really, I thought you saw really Lucas come into his own at that point and really take control of the game and being able to distribute the ball. So I think you're right, but I think those opportunities are because of the development of the quarterback and the comfort of the entire program from Coach Hoke down, and being able to allow our quarterback to control the game and put the ball into his hands. And then you saw, really our last, from UNLV to Boise, Utah State, regardless of what happened, we had many of opportunities there to take advantage of opportunities to score and win that game. And that's really on us in the first half. We should have been better. But then in the bowl game, you saw, I think that was everything coming together. And that's where I think you saw Lucas really, come together and play a complete 60-minute football game.
Yeah, that Frisco Bowl it seemed like, just from what I can remember, that there was a lot more throws on early downs and a lot more throws downfield. Was that something that you worked on and prepared for going into the game, or is that just kind of how it worked out?
No, that's who we want to be. I think that's, believe me, I feel all the frustrations that are out there too, because I think that really, I think that Frisco Bowl, 14-2, we've played 22 games, right? Together. I've been here for 22 games. And I think that Frisco Bowl was a culmination of 21 games, all that development coming together in one moment, and it really starting to come out and show itself. You got to remember, we didn't have Lucas for really the COVID fall camp in the first 2 weeks of the season because he was injured. He comes back, he gets injured in the first half in Nevada. We don't have him the rest of the season. He's not even dressed the rest of the season. And so, it's been a development stage through that. Jordan played really well. And at times you saw, you were able to see what we would see at practice with Jordan. But then there were times where, it didn't go as smoothly for him. And that's where Lucas, I thought, took advantage of his opportunity and really started to develop. And I thought it all came together in that. You look back to the Nevada game, I thought we controlled that game, for the most part, with being able to throw the ball and run the ball, throughout the course of the game. I thought UNLV, and I thought in critical situations, being able to throw the ball, that I thought that's, when UNLV, when we won the game, and basically put it away when we threw on third and goal to Jesse, and that was Jesse's third touchdown. I think it's just been a process that I had hoped maybe it would go quicker. I know everybody around us had hoped it would go quicker, but, we're better off today because of everything we've had to go through to get here. I'm a better coach. I'm a better quarterback coach. And I think I'm a better coordinator, and we're a better staff because of everything we've had to do in order to get to this point, in order for the Frisco Bowl to happen. And for everything to come together, sometimes it doesn't always go the way we want it to go. But at the end of the day, the end result was the 12th win and really the shining moment on what hopefully is really the progression of what our passing game is now for seasons to come. Because, you look at Boise, we were able to, really light it up in terms of throwing the football in those moments where we had to. And that's, being able to play from behind, being able to play from multiple scores from behind, and then in the bowl game, being able to take control of the game now through the passing game.
We had Jordan Brookshire on the podcast about a month ago, and it was an incredible interview. Got great insight into him as a person. He mentioned the difficult conversation you two had at the end of this last season about him not being able to return in 2022. Like a young man as terrific as Jordan, how difficult is it to have that conversation with somebody, about the future?
Well, Coach Oak talks about it all the time. The thing that makes a good coach is the ability to have those difficult conversations, and they're not fun. Nobody wants to have them. And Jordan is a tremendous person, a tremendous fighter. I mean, you think of everything that he's been through since he's been here, and the amount of respect, and you've heard me say this before multiple times, the amount of respect I have for Jordan Brookshire is I mean, I can't even put it into measurement terms. I mean, he is just a tremendous individual, and he's going to be successful in whatever it is he chooses to do in the rest of his life. But it's also about doing and putting the program in the best position that we can put the program in, because at the end of the day, it's not about a coach. It's not about a player. The program is the most important thing in the development of the program. And so, and that's what Jordan and I talked about. We have to move in a different direction, partially because of, COVID has put us in this position. We've got to get back to 85. But on the other end of it, too, we have to continue to build the room and build the quarterback room. And unfortunately, we're not going to have a spot for you. And being Jordan, very professional, and it's a very professional conversation. And I think when you're upfront and honest about that, it enables both parties to be professional about it. And it wasn't what he wanted to hear. And I don't think after Arizona, any of us thought that would be the case. But that's why we play a whole season, and that's why you go through everything you go through in order to get to those decisions and how everything works itself out. And believe me, there's nothing more than we would like to help all of them out. But also we're not able to do that. And so those conversations were had not only with Jordan, but with other players on the team too.
Yeah, speaking of the quarterback room, you've got two true freshmen that enrolled early, Kyle Krum and Leo Amiva. We had a chance to also have them on the podcast, actually our inaugural episode, and they were talking about how excited they were to compete on the football field, but also talked about the importance of, going to class, bonding with teammates, the work they do off the field. So how do you think so far the two freshman quarterbacks have done in reaching those goals?
I think they're extremely impressive for two individuals. Not usually you have one, but we're in a different situation, in a different, position in terms of what our needs were in the quarterback room. We have two, and they have two individuals who, we're two practices in, and really through the first two practices, you would not know that 2 months ago they were still in high school. And I don't think through winter workouts, you would have known, you wouldn't have been able to pick those kids out and say, man, those kids were in high school 2 months ago. They're extremely prepared. They're extremely calm. They're well coached coming in, and they have a mindset that fits with us, and that mentality of toughness and physicality and work. And so I think they've blended extremely well. I think their performance shows on the field in two practices. I think, Andre, you were out there, right? And you see that, they don't look like they stand out in the wrong way. They look like they fit right in. And that's really the first part of being a college football player is looking like you fit in and feeling like you fit in, and both those do. And it's a credit to them. It's a credit to their families. It's a credit to their high schools and their high school coaches because they're very well prepared coming in.
Okay, so I need you to uncrack a mystery for me. You've also been a recruiting coordinator everywhere, and so you've seen how this works through. Monday was the first time that I got to see Kyle Krum in person, but I've seen him on video. He wrote multiple articles on him. Mm-hmm. How on earth did he not have 15 offers?
There is a transformation in college football going on right now that started 2 years ago when COVID hit. And I think you're seeing a bunch of different forces kind of come together. And it's different avenues to be able to build your program now. The transfer portal has obviously created an avenue of players to be able to recruit and build your program around. I think COVID and not being able to get out, and especially for California kids, if you remember, they didn't play till the spring. And so a lot of that recruiting cycle was done for a lot of programs before they even got to a junior year. And then if you remember here in California too, the difference in how we were able to interact as teammates and as players and as programs compared to some other places in the country, there was a lot of social distancing still with us. There was a lot of times where we couldn't use a ball, where we couldn't be within 5 feet of each other, where other areas of the country were operating almost as normal. And so, all of that creates a different level of development throughout the course of the country, where some kids look more developed to others because of what they've been able to do compared to what others could not be able to do. And so you're just seeing a whole system come together at once that now all of a sudden, creates opportunity for other programs, and it creates opportunities for kids. Maybe the best situation was for Kyle Krum to be here, but he wouldn't have known that otherwise, because he would have had 10 to 15 other offers through a normal cycle, pre-COVID, pre-2020, pre-everything, when everything was really what we know as a normal recruiting cycle. There are no normal recruiting cycles anymore, to be honest with you. And so I think we're all in an adjustment phase right now. I think players are adjusting to it. I think programs are adjusting to it. And I think some of the people who might benefit from this are some of the other programs outside of the Power Five, and maybe even some of the programs outside of Division I. You think of North Dakota State and South Dakota State and FCS, and they're getting 3, 4, 5 players drafted a year now. And I think that's because of a lot of this cycle that's coming through right now.
That's really interesting. During your press conference last week, you mentioned that Will Haskell has really come into his own, and you mentioned both on and off the field. And I think you gave the time frame as a month, which is a coincidence because that's also when all these other quarterbacks kind of came onto campus and started mixing in. Is that a coincidence, or what is it about Will's development that he's really taken this challenge and is meeting it?
Well, I don't think it's coincidence. I think it's something that we've been working on. You got to remember, the Wednesday night before we play Boise, Will test positive for COVID. He doesn't get cleared until 8 a.m. Saturday morning when we're about to take the field to go into pregame warmups for Utah State. And so you're talking about, a kind of a roller coaster ride that Will had throughout the course of his his freshman season, true freshman season. And I think what you've seen is now, a natural maturity that comes with all these guys as they come through their first season into their first spring. They understand what it is to be a college student. They understand what it is to be in class. They understand all the things that come with being a major college football player. And it's really more of a confidence and a comfort that they start to develop through this process. And you can really see that in Will, that confidence and that comfort in being here. We're all still a work in progress through this. We're a young team. And you've heard Coach say that, really since we've started back, how young we really are. I've been impressed with the work of all the young guys, but we have a long way to go in this process. And really Will's development is in just one example of many that we're having right now, where you're really starting to see all of them come in and really say, hey, I'm a good football player and I have a balance off the field that allows me to really accelerate what I'm doing on the field now. And that's really what you see. Will's a confident kid. If you've ever talked to him, Will's confidence is off the charts to begin with. And that's what you love about him. And now he's able to really immerse himself, both everything that's happening to him off the field and what's happening to him on the field. And that's really the development that we're talking about.
It's with all the hype surrounding Will, it's difficult to remember that he's only been on campus for 9 months. Mm-hmm. Do you think that his progression in those 9 months is where you would have expected him to be? Is he above that, below that? And where do you see in potentially by fall where he would end up?
I think he's right where he needs to be. I think I think, and personally, when you watch the development of all the quarterbacks that were in his class, and then you watch how he played, I think he exceeded all expectations of what anybody could have expected. Sometimes that creates a false level of expectations too, because you got to remember, like you said, he's only been here for 9 months, but he is extremely talented, and you can see that talent come out at times. But I think he's right where he needs to be. I don't necessarily like to say anybody's ahead or behind, because really every individual person is different, and that development is different for them, and you never know when it's going to click. And so you handle each one as his own person. You never lump them together, and you coach them individually. So each one of those guys, every one of our young guys is being coached individually, because each one needs something different. So I think Will's right where he needs to be. I think he's progressing at an accelerated rate, and I'm excited to see how we go through the rest of these 13 practices. His progression from practice 1 to practice 2 was off the charts. And, he takes coaching well. He listens. He's got that right kind of look. He doesn't like to make mistakes. And so, he's got that right kind of attitude where it's important to him. And I'm excited to see where he goes over the next 13 practices. If he can keep making those same jumps from practice 1 to practice 2, we've all seen what he's capable of doing. Now, can you do it day in and day out, rep after rep, throughout the course of a whole season? That's what makes a quarterback a great quarterback.
And then the fourth quarterback in your room that we haven't talked about is Braxton Burmeister, the transfer. And so Paul and I were at practice. We were watching the quarterbacks do their drills on Monday. And the name that both of us came up with is Jeff Garcia. Just his throwing motion, his mechanics in the number 5. Right. Paul actually pointed out that in high school he was trained by Jeff Garcia. So maybe some of that came from that. But what have you learned about Braxton in his short time at San Diego State? And would you agree with that Jeff Garcia kind of comparison?
I did not know he was trained until I saw that the other day too. Mm-hmm. So, yes, I would agree. He's extremely smooth in everything that he does. And that allows him to be extremely accurate. And that's something, when you talk about the progression of our passing game, one of the things we struggled with as we were coming through this process was our accuracy. And when you saw our passing game start to take off, like you said, the last third and really more into the last half, we became more accurate. And really that's a credit to each one of those players, a credit to Lucas and everybody that threw the ball, because that's all mechanics and fundamentals. And when your mechanics and fundamentals right, you have a chance to be accurate. Braxton is extremely smooth, and it allows him to repeat his mechanics over and over and over and over again. I think right now we've thrown the ball 15 times in team, and Braxton's 8 of 9 with 3 scrambles. And so, from that standpoint, that accuracy, you're shocked when he misses, but he's able to repeat those mechanics over and over again. That's what you're seeing when you compare him to Jeff Garcia. That smoothness, everything always looks like he's in rhythm and in balance. And that's what he brings. He's tough. He is tough. If you ever watched him play, go back and watch his Virginia Tech film. He's tough. He's highly intelligent. I think you mentioned that he asked a lot of questions, or he felt confident asking a lot of questions. And that's because he thinks football. And that's really what we're trying to impress upon the 3 young kids between Will, Leo, and Kyle. You got to constantly think football as a quarterback. You got to constantly ask why. Asking me why, I don't take as a negative. I take as a fact is you want to know exactly, if this happens, why do I do this? Or if this happens, why am I doing this? Or what if this happens? Because you got to be prepared to handle everything as a quarterback. And that's what he's really brought to our room, is that toughness and ability to think football all across the board. And then you see it in the way that he practices and the way that he plays. And, we're going through some footwork adjustments. We went through an adjustment yesterday, and it improved his accuracy. Right now he's 88% in team, and he's between 7-on-7 and Skelly. He's at 69%. And so that a little adjustment we made yesterday is, has helped him create more accuracy too, coming through it. And that's going to be what we're doing throughout the course of the spring is all those little footwork adjustments that help him tie into everything that we're doing here, because we're going to drop back and throw the football, and that's who we are, and that's who we want to be. And so we're working through all that with him right now.
So bear with me a little bit more of these statistics. Last year you
I like you. I'm a statistics guy too, so we're all good with all this. Believe me.
Perfect. You mentioned that you really wanted to improve in the red zone.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2020, SDSU ranked 114th, only converting 78% of the time. 45% of those went for touchdowns. A year ago, you jumped 80 spots, 34th in the country, scored 88% of your chances, and 65% of those were touchdowns. So as you go into this season, when you play ball control, you limit possessions, things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
So scoring touchdowns in the red zone is gigantic for the style of play.
Correct.
And is being that effective in the red zone, are you saying going into this year that you found kind of a recipe for coaching and success, so you're going to do it again and emphasize it just as much, or are you able to like pull back a little bit and focus on other things because you did have that success?
I think you're right on both parts. Okay. And I think let's go back to something you touched on first, playing ball control. Controlling the game doesn't mean you're not scoring. Controlling the game means that you have the ability to score touchdowns, whether they come fast or whether you're methodically playing, 8, 10, 12, 14 play drives, but you're still in control of the game. Controlling the game means the defense is off the field and you're keeping their defense on the field. Okay. When we control the game, when you saw us at our best last season, we were able to control the game both on the ground and in the air. And our quarterback was able to control the game. And that's what we have to continue. Okay. You have to be able to score touchdowns, regardless of whether or not you're fast paced or you're controlling the game like we are. Scoring touchdowns gives you the best opportunity to win. If you're trading touchdowns for field goals and we're the scoring touchdowns and they're kicking field goals, we're going to win the game. There's no way they can catch us. But if we're on the flip side of that, now we got a problem, because now you're playing catch up ball and you don't have that ability to score touchdowns. So the ultimate goal for us is to be able to score touchdowns. Hopefully now, as we continue to grow, some of those touchdowns come outside the red zone. And that's what we have to get better at. I think what we did a year ago, and really Coach Hoke, and that same premise is going to be in our practice and our practice structure. We practice red zone almost every day, and we practice backed up almost every day. We had 33 series that started inside our own 10-yard line, and we were able to gain 1 or 2 first downs, I think, on over 65% of those. Okay. That's how you turn the field. That's how you turn it over to Matt Horizon now, and he's able to punt the ball 80 yards, and now they start inside their 10-yard line. But that's a product of the work that we do throughout the course of the week in practice, and also spring ball and fall camp. It's the same thing in the red zone. We improved in the red zone because we were able to practice more in the red zone and really identify what players we're going to attack with and how we're going to attack with them. And so I think that's going to be a huge emphasis coming into this. It'll be a huge emphasis coming into this spring and fall, because we still have to establish, we got Jesse, Tyrell, but now, who takes over for Dan? I think Chance Bell and JB are going to be phenomenal. I'm anxious to see what a Jalen Armstead does and how his development comes. But now, who are the next set of tight ends? Who really are the other wideouts besides Jesse and Terrell that step up and emerge? And so that's got to be a product. Quarterbacks learning how to throw in there, and they're going to make some mistakes, but we got to make them in practice in order to identify them so they learn. And I thought that's why we were able to make such a huge jump. We have to put a concerted effort. If you look at, we were 11 out of 18 in the top 50 statistical offensive categories. We had 11 out of those 18 categories where we were in the top 50 in the country. Good. Our bottom 4 are where we got to improve. So we're 4 out of 18 in the bottom 25. In third down conversion, passing offense, passing yards per completion, and total offense. Those are the 4 areas we got to get into the top 50, and that's got to be the emphasis now moving forward, coming in. And we've already started that. I mean, like I said, each quarterback's had 20 total team reps. Between Will and Braxton, they've had 20 total team reps. Okay. We've thrown the ball, I think, 30 times in those 40 total reps each day, because that's the only way we're going to improve it. And we've got to get now those. So it's a twofold question you ask, but it's got to be handled together. We got to continue the development in the red zone and continue those practice sessions. But then we got to take our bottom four and we got to bring those into the top half of the country. If we do that, now you're talking about being where we all expect us to be offensively. And we've talked about it before. We should have an offense that matches our defense. And that's where we're headed to.
You answered my second question. I think Andre's got a pair more. And
well, I didn't want to throw numbers back at you, but when you start talking stats, I mean, that is, I am a big numbers guy.
Okay.
Huge numbers guy, because the numbers tell you where your strengths are and where your weaknesses lie. And if we can keep our strengths and, minimize our weaknesses and bring them up so they match our strengths, then now, we become a highly effective offense in all situations against all defenses. And that's the goal.
You mentioned earlier that you were you're also the quarterback's coach. And we noticed on Monday, you're a lot more hands-on with the quarterbacks than you were with some of the practices in the fall that we attended. How does your role change in the spring as a quarterback coach compared to in the fall when you might be installing an offense?
I think my role changed. I think I realized I became a better coach. And you got to remember, I mean, we're all learning. We're all constantly learning. I'm trying to learn. We're all constantly learning and trying to learn. And I don't have all the answers. And when I come up against something that really I struggle with, I'm going to go search and find those answers to be able to help get us to where we need to be. I thought after San Jose State, I needed to restructure myself. And if you think about it, San Jose State, we really struggled throwing the football. I looked back at myself and said, okay, I got to restructure myself here because obviously something's not working. I have not been able to translate to the quarterbacks and get us in a position so we become accurate to be able to make the throws that need to be made in order to not have games like that. And so I thought my restructuring of myself and my thought process through this and what we came through with was, it should say quarterback coach, offensive coordinator. It's not offensive coordinator, quarterback coach. I coach arguably the most important position on the field. And in order to do that, my emphasis and my time has to be dedicated to those men. And getting those men fundamentally and mechanically sound. If you look back at that San Jose State game, we weren't throwing to the wrong guys. We weren't able to make the throws. Well, that's mechanics and fundamentals. That's the work that I'm doing during practice. And so, you guys aren't privy to, all the practices that happened since that point. And so really from that point on, I was more like I was what you saw Monday from that point on. And that was really me learning the importance of being a position coach and being able to micromanage being a position coach and coordinator. And so, hopefully that was part of our transition in our process to becoming a more complete passing team that ended up being where we were at Boise State and Frisco. And now hopefully that process now that we learned and I learned through that now helps us start in where we left off at Frisco and against UTSA and helps us begin against Arizona. And at least when I look at the first two practices, I think we're in a great spot right now. I really do.
And the last question we have for you before we let you go is about the youth of the offense, right? That's a primary word to describe, given the amount of people you lost and a bunch of newcomers. Given that, how crucial was it that Jordan Bird, Chance Bell, and Alama Uluave decided to return for super senior seasons? Could you envision a world without those three guys back too?
No, it was critical. It was absolutely critical. First off, you got three of the toughest football players that now can help guide and lead, not only at their positions, but at other positions. And I think you got two others. I think you got Terrell and Jesse. You got to throw in that mix too. I think you got five guys there who are tremendous leaders and really see a a pathway to where we're headed and what we can do and have a belief in that. And so that was critical for us, absolutely critical. Although I do think that college football is really becoming younger and younger and younger in our process and our player development process, you know, and the way that we've recruited, you know, we got some very talented young players, but we have experienced players who have played a lot of great football for us to help lead them. And so I think we got a great blend right now. And now we got to have a great 13 practices to finish out. They'll have another 3 months with Coach Hall. Then we'll have another 30 practices together before we even hit the field against Arizona to open up our stadium, the Snapdragon Stadium. So, you know, it's a daily process. And I mean, I can't thank all of those guys enough for believing in us enough to want to come back. And then obviously the goal is to win 22 and to have that drive to push this team to win 22 and make their legacy the team that wins 22. And so I think it all ties itself together, and you know, we're grateful and I'm thankful that they believe in us enough to do that.
Coach, thank you so much. This was an incredible interview. We got some great insight. Both Paul and I are looking forward to seeing how the offense looks in the spring game and then moving towards the fall.
So am I. I can tell you that. I'm excited to see how it goes. I thank you guys also for everything you do for, you know, not only for football, but for all of San Diego State athletics, because, you know, it's a national program, and it needs to be a national program across the board, and not just in football and basketball. We got great athletes and great coaches in all of our sports that do a lot of wonderful things out there and win a lot of games. And thank you for bringing all that attention to the entire program and the entire athletic department. Really appreciate you guys.
Thank you. We appreciate that. All right, Paul, we had the conversation with Coach Heck about, you know, how he's seen the offense, you know, over the last 2 years and where he sees it going. What were your main takeaways from our discussion with him?
Well, people bemoan the idea that coaches speak in coach speak, right? We didn't get a lot of that from Coach Heklinski. I thought it was a very honest interview. His ability to just kind of take us into his whole thought process of him seeing what we're all seeing, that the passing game wasn't what it needed to be. And then he said that what needed to happen was him growing as a coach. And I thought that was a very honest moment. I thought that was a really important moment, primarily because I think the numbers bear out that it worked, right? If he was super honest about saying what I was doing as an offensive coordinator / quarterback coach, and I needed to change things up, and then he changed things up and the Aztecs still couldn't pass the ball, I think that's a problem. But I think there's some hope that the offense can be what it needs to be, because after the San Jose State game, when he made that change and became the QB coach / offensive coordinator, the passing game was absolutely better. The percentage of completions and all of those kind of things all went up. So, you know, I think there's a lot of hope that maybe they have figured out how to get these quarterbacks going. What about you?
Yeah, I definitely think the transparency about his self-reflection as a coach is something I don't know if we expected to hear that from him. And you could tell that the passing game did improve after that. I thought it was interesting. He was talking about how the Frisco Bowl was like the culmination of 21 games of, you know, struggle or trying to figure it out. And while I agree that that was by far the best offensive performance, maybe we would feel a little bit more excited if a lot of those guys came back, right? They're replacing 8 of those 11 starters on offense. And so it almost seems like it's a restart in a way, you know, because the quarterbacks aren't there. Most of the linemen, the starting running back, starting receiver, other than one guy, tight end, all sorts of. So it's almost like now you got to do it again, right? What he did at the end of last season, he's got to do it again, and he's got to do it with mostly brand new players. So I think that's interesting. And the main takeaway was just talking about his discussion with Jordan Berkshire obviously that was a very honest and transparent. And he talked about how, being upfront and honest with folks allows both parties to be professional and have those difficult conversations without things bubbling over. So I thought that was definitely great insight from him.
Yeah, I think that stood out to me as well. Going back to the idea about how new all of the offense is. I mean, it does seem like last year was the prime place for the offense to take off with as many veteran players that were there. And then, we heard from Elijah Cody a few weeks ago, and he was invited back, but decided that it wasn't in his best interest to keep going. And so there is a lot of newness. But I like the fact that he didn't give himself that out at the beginning. He could have very easily said, there's all this newness, we're all really, really young, but he made it absolutely the goal that what they did in the Frisco Bowl is what to expect going forward from the passing game this year. And the truth is, unless Chance Bell, Jordan Byrd, or any of the backs that are behind them, unless they do something that, we haven't seen from them yet, they're going to need the passing game to be what it was at the very, very end. And I definitely don't want to imply that the passing game is a known commodity. But I think the important piece about it is that you can definitely see the effectiveness of Coach Heklinski's his work. You can see them get better and you can see them improve. What that'll mean for this upcoming season, is anybody's guess. But as we've seen everywhere, improved play out of the quarterback can make all the difference in the world.
Quarterbacks need to be accurate. Last year, they were not accurate. Get back to mechanics and fundamentals. And he talked about, when we asked him about Braxton Burmeister, he talked about how he's accurate and his mechanics allow him to be accurate. And I think that's going to go a long way to determine who the starting quarterback is on September 3rd. Is not who has the strongest arm, not who can run the fastest, but who can get the ball to the receivers open consistently, play after play. Because last year we saw a lot of open receivers get thrown the ball and not hit them in the hands or anywhere close to it. So that's going to be interesting. The other key thing that I took away, and I did some homework on this after the conversation, was you asked him about the red zone numbers, about the improvement from 2020 to 2021 of red zone efficiency. And he had a great answer for that, but he ended by saying, we want to get better at scoring outside of the red zone, meaning we want to make big plays where instead of scoring inside the 20, we're at the 40 and we're scoring a touchdown on that one play, right? Bigger plays. So last year, the first two games of the season against New Mexico State and Arizona, the Aztecs scored 7 offensive touchdowns. This is offense only, no special teams, no defense. Out of those 7, 5 of them were outside of the red zone. And 3 of them were longer than 40 yards. It was Jordan Byrd had a 43-yard run, Greg Bell had a 55-yard run, and Ethan Dedeaux had a 40-yard pass from Berkshire, right? So 5 out of 7 in the first 2 games. The next 12 games of the season, out of 33 offensive touchdowns, they only had 5 outside of the red zone. So the first 2 games matched the last 12 games, and only one of those 5 were longer than 30 yards, and it was a Jordan Byrd 55-yard run against New Mexico, I believe. So and I'm not saying that it's a critical stat to have to score touchdowns 50 yards out, because a smart person would say, well, if you're at the 50-yard line and you get a 40-yard pass and you get to the 10 and then you score a 10-yard touchdown, that's still the same, right? And that's accurate. But how many plays are there where the coach calls a big play, a shot down the field, there's an open receiver, and the quarterback doesn't execute, or the receiver doesn't execute, or the lineman doesn't block, and maybe it's 3rd down, so you don't get another chance on that drive, or maybe the next play is a turnover. So while I don't think it's a highly critical stat in success, I think it is important as an improving offense to also be able to hit big plays for touchdowns moving forward.
I agree. I think this had been a theme that we talked about throughout the season. Beginning with Utah, teams stopped trying to attack San Diego State. Greg Bell, as we've talked about it again and again, his biggest strength is cutback lanes, is being able to, be at one side and see when a hole on the complete opposite side opens up. And teams were content to give Greg Bell 3 yards, keep him bottled up, and prevent him from having that big play. And to do that, that meant that they weren't blitzing. That meant that they weren't getting out of their lanes. That meant that they were trying to keep everything in front of them. And I think, to your point, they looked at the tape and they said, we can't give up big plays. If they're going to score on us, we have to make them march it down the field. And then this goes back to accuracy. That's where accuracy becomes another big part, because, if everything is 3rd and 4, if everything is 3rd and 3, because that's just what the defense is going to be able to give you, you got to be able to convert those short distances. And so I think part of the stat that you're talking about is the fact that defenses, they really said this team can't score in big chunks. So we're going to make sure, beg your pardon, they can score in big chunks. We're going to make sure that we don't give them the big play. And I think going forward and going into this season, if they're able to recapture that, I think that would be huge, because, it's very possible if Burmeister, and if he's not the starter, whoever is able to pass him, the expectation would be that they are going to be better at passing the ball, especially at the start of the year. It may work in reverse, where they're good at passing the ball, and then because they're good at passing the ball, they're going to have a little bit more space to be able to run, which we haven't seen at San Diego State in a very, very long time. But until, San Diego State can prove that they are a passing team, I would expect, very much the same formula, because with the exception of that final bowl game, they didn't look like they had a huge dynamic offense. I think that bowl game was the only time where you could say that both the running game and the passing game both got going at the same time. And so it'll be interesting to see, how they're able to build off of it, because again, as you said, they lost a lot of people. And has the culture been built enough that they can just have the new players come in and be okay?
This is the second week of a 4-week spring camp, which culminates in the spring game on Thursday, March 24th. So a lot of these questions, a lot of these discussions about the offense, it's going to be interesting to see how the offense does in that spring game. And I know with this year it being open to the public, and the fans are excited about getting to watch it in person. Last year it was only open to media and family members of the players. So it'll be interesting. I think Aztec fans are going to be excited. Any final thoughts before we sign off?
Yeah, I think one other thing I think that's really important as, we're thinking about the offense and trying to understand it. I for an article that I wrote, I kind of went back through Brady Hoke's 20 years of being a head coach. And I didn't actually keep track of all of the 300-yard games, because once I found out that Lucas Johnson was the 12th highest offensive throwing output that any player has had under Hoke, it kind of told the story enough anyway. But going through them and just kind of in my memory, I would say that every season a Brady Hoke led team had 2 300-yard passing games. And San Diego State was no different. I think they had 290 against Boise State. So they were right there in that frame. And I think that if Aztec fans are thinking that, Burmeister, Haskell are going to have 400-yard passing days and be throwing it all over the field and all of that kind of stuff, I just think that's a false expectation. They want to have balance, and that balance looks like, 200 yards passing, 150 yards, rushing, and that's a pretty good game, right? I mean, that would be a little bit on the low side, but you start getting those different ideas. And I think that's where the idea that maybe they're closer than people think, because they don't have to jump up 200 yards in production. They need to jump up 45 yards in production. They need to jump up, 60 yards in production. And I just think it's important to keep that kind of idea in mind, because really for their offense to go from where it ended this year, I think, in the bottom 25, as Heklinski said, in total offense, to go where into that top 50, it's really one or two more drives a game. That's all we're talking about. And if they can get a couple of first downs, if they can get some key plays, because again, he talked about how they weren't very good on third down. They changed that, and their offense could be exactly where, they're talking about them wanting to be. So I think the biggest takeaway for me is that they may not be as far away from that success as, they're talking about, with, again, the caveat, if they were last year's team. And who knows if how much of that translates again.
Third down conversion is key, because what do you do on third down? Unless it's like 3rd and 1 or 2 or 3, you're passing the ball. And if you can't complete, 6-7 yard passes to move the chains, then you're not going to be successful. And I think most Aztec fans maybe understand that they're not going to get 300 to 400 yard passing performances. But if you can complete first down passes on third down when the other team knows you're going to pass, that's the key, right? If the other team knows you're going to pass and you can still complete it and get a first down, that shows that you're improving in that regard, because they have not been able to do that the last couple of years. And that the third down percentage is a key stat that I looked at a lot, offensively and defensively, right? Aztecs defense did a tremendous job with third down conversion percentage against, right, holding teams to under 30%. So that'll be key for sure. That's going to do it for us. We want to thank you guys for joining us and listening in, and we will talk to you guys next time. You are listening to the SDSU Football Podcast, presented by the East Village Times, with your hosts Andre Hagverdian and Paul Garrison.